Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming along to the Safeguarding Overview and Scrutiny Committee. We'll jump straight in with any apologies, please. Item 1.
Yes, Chair, thank you. We have apologies from Councillor Mike Wilcox, Councillor and Vice Chairman Richard Ford, and Councillor Derek Huckfield.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Item 3, then, the minutes of the last meeting held on the 21st of April. I trust everyone's had an opportunity to look through them. Can I sign them as a fair and accurate record? And we'll move on then to item 4 and the report to Cabinet member, or by Cabinet member, children and young persons around neglect. Mark, would you like to open?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everybody. So I have with me Nish Gupta, who is the Assistant Director for Children's Social Care. I'm not sure whether Nish has been to this committee previously, but she's been with us for a good few months now, since the start of the changeover to children's transformation. So this morning gives you an opportunity to scrutinise some of the work that's been going on around neglect, which includes low-level neglect. Members will recall the unfortunate fire in Stafford, where a number of young people lost their lives. Following that, a review was commissioned into that, and that review was published in November of 2020. And there were 3 main findings which are included in your report, and that's to develop an understanding of the impact of neglect on children, the use of appropriate professional curiosity, and to understand family history and ability to understand and act upon a child's lived experience. The report is there for you. I'll ask Nisha now to give you an overview of our progress to date, and then obviously happy to take your questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Good morning, everyone. In terms of progress update, so if I go by the 3 main findings from the serious case review, which was around developing an understanding of impact of neglect, and this includes low-level neglect, because neglect is almost like a continuum, and professionals across the partnership need to be able to develop that awareness and understanding that at which point does it move from low level to somewhere where you need to take a step further and make it more serious. So we take it as a continuum, as a partnership. What we have tried to do is to develop an awareness across the partnership around what does neglect look like? How do you identify neglect? How do you evidence that? How do you work with parents, children and families around issues around neglect? And when do we need to escalate it through our thresholds? So in terms of raising awareness, of course, I would want everyone to understand that we have gone through a period of COVID where things were quite difficult. We developed first a joint protocol, a strategic joint protocol, whereby all partnerships, including non-statutory partners, were made a part of that protocol to be able to understand what their roles and responsibilities are when it comes to working with children and families around neglect. So that was agreed and signed off. What we also have done is developed, and we are constantly reviewing that, is our performance standards as to what is the performance framework that as a partnership we are bringing together to be able to understand how well are we doing in this area. And then we have regular updates for whereby each partner brings together when we are through the working groups and annual updates into the partnership. As part of awareness generation, we decided that we would go with the NSPCC tool of Graded Care Profile 2. And we've done a lot of trainings and conferences around that. We had very ambitious plans. We still are progressing with the training now because we've got the champions who can deliver in-house training to our staff. We have a lot of staff across the partnership, which includes education, police, health, and social care. So the training is ongoing. We have we have held conferences whereby it's included in the report. Around 1,200 staff have participated in those conferences, and we have trained roughly around 600 staff. You can only use the tool when you are trained, so you do not get access to using the tool without the training. So we are trying to work through, we have set up the graded care profile steering group now, which looks at not just the training, but the actual use. What we've realized is that despite the staff being trained over the last 2 years, the actual use, we can't see the actual use of the tool to inform the assessments. So this is something that we have started again in this financial year. I believe that the steering group was set up previously as well, but because of COVID and children's transformation, I suppose as a partnership, there was a bit of a delay in terms of progressing plans through the steering group. It's now fully in place and is led by our principal social worker. In terms of the awareness generation and training around the use of tool, whilst I have said that we are not using the tool as much and we want to put some momentum behind the use of the actual tool, what I don't want anyone to feel is that we are ignoring the issues of neglect. We absolutely are not. And how we are finding the impact of all the awareness generation that we have done and the work around multi-agency partnership working and working together, we can see from our audits that our professionals who are working around children and families in communities and within the higher tiers of Tier 3 and Tier 4 services, we are absolutely capturing the lived experience of children. We are absolutely working with children in a restorative manner to be able to understand and grasp the issues of neglect, including low-level neglect from an early stage. So what we are seeing is families are beginning to receive that early support within communities, and we are consistently having that dialogue, not just within the partnership, but through the system where families are being supported in a child in need, child protection and looked after plans. We know that a large majority of our children who are known to local authority at Tier 3 and Tier 4 services, we know that an underlying cause could have been or would have been a level of neglect in their history or in current circumstances. And we've got those services working together quite effectively to understand the voice of the child, to understand their lived experience, to develop multi-agency plans to support children and families within communities, within their family environment, and to develop the family's resilience, routines, and their ability to deal with issues around deprivation, around mental health, around domestic abuse. All of this constitutes at some point into neglect. So we are working together, and how do we know this is through our audits, through the feedback that we receive from children and families. We have regular meetings in terms of, the early help review meetings, these child in need meetings, child protection meetings, and the feedback, how effective those plans have been to make a difference to children's lived experiences. And what we also have seen very recently is when Ofsted visited us in May, that they reviewed quite a lot of our children open to us on child in need and child protection plans, and not one child did they raise any concerns about. In fact, what they saw was we do good assessments, we have robust plans, we have very effective partnership which is working around the child and the family to support them within communities. What my report highlights is work that is still needing to be done. So part of it, I have said earlier, it is establishing the steering group whereby we want more staff and professionals to use the tool. The use of tool is basically to get the evidence together in one place. That doesn't take away the skill and the professionalism of the staff and professionals who are working with the child. So we need to understand that in perspective. Use of tool will make us more crisp in terms of gathering our evidence around it, which is what we are looking to do going forward.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah. Councillor Bennett.
Yeah, I think that the training is good, but I think where it falls down is when the dedicated social worker who's working with the family is off either ill, on holiday or whatever. It's passed on to someone else who doesn't know the case and is not fully up to date with what's happening. And I think that's where the main problem is. And I think no matter how much training you do, you're always going to have this situation. And I need to know how you're going to address that. Thank you.
Sorry. So we do have, we know that in Staffordshire, it's not just a local issue, it is a regional and national issue in terms of social work recruitment, movement, sickness, and so I can see you're shaking your head, so you're well aware of it. What we have in Staffordshire is a very stable and able management group. So when social workers are moving, either they leave or they're off sick or they're on leave, we have got those team managers who have got oversight, and that's something that we looked at in transformation as well. We have smaller social work teams, so that team managers have a good oversight on all the children that are being held by the social workers that they manage. So that oversight allows for a level of continuity when it comes to planning for that child and the family. There are certain instances whereby, yes, there is a bit of drift. We know that. Sometimes there is drift, which is with the best will in the world. We're trying everything to contain that drift, but it is hard. What we are doing is to create that stable and able workforce for future, which is why we are investing in Grow Our Own. So this year we have recruited 39 newly qualified social workers. We are looking at our recruitment and retention policies. But what we want to do is to train our social workers in the way we want to work, in a restorative way we want to work in Staffordshire, and retain them going forward. Because recruiting newly qualified is not an issue. I suppose many local authorities can do that. It's retaining them, because once you train them, and in Staffordshire, I said it in another meeting in one day, we are very old school, but that means we do things properly here. And that's a good way of doing things in Staffordshire. We want to retain that skill within the workforce. So going forward, we are trying to ameliorate these issues around workforce.
Councillor Sutton, I think you wanted to add something to
Yeah, just quickly on the point that Jill's raised. We never, the greatest will in the world, we're never going to be able to eradicate, all sickness, all leave and everything like that. However, what I would say, the very basis of the transformation idea was to work on that district model, and one of the aims was to reduce the amount of handoffs to other teams that we have, and if they still come under the same structure, and colleagues who may have dealt with that child and when it was child protection, as that child might go into care, the teams would be in working together, so more likely to be able to have a crisper handover. But the amount of handovers, the idea of that with transformation is to be reduced to a minimum.
Thank you for that. Councillor Burnett, did you want to? No. Councillor McMahon, I think you wanted.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from Jill's point, if I may, it was what appeared in the Mcallister Report, which Helen Phillips sent to us. It talks that nationally, that children's social workers, only a third of them actually see children, and those that do see children only spend 30% of their time actually with children and families. And that's clearly a huge waste of resource. And he emphasises that a couple of times. And I just would like some understanding of where we sit with that in Staffordshire. I mean, it's clearly a national, it's a national problem, and the problem's inherent in the system that we have to work in. But it talks also about top-down policies having difficult unintended consequences, and it's talking about national top-down policies. So I'd like some understanding of where we sit with that in terms of face-to-face work with the social workers do, and what we're doing from a bottom-up perspective to mitigate the sort of challenges that are described in the Mcallister Report. Thank you.
So in terms of social work time with children and families, that is again another thing that was thought through during transformation, and that is why we have PA to social workers offer in Staffordshire. So for every 5 social workers, we have got 1 business support who is there to support them get through the paperwork. Of course, there is certain things that a social worker has to do themselves, like writing their own assessments, writing their own visits, and that is something that is a part of the statutory mechanism that we are all a part of, which we have to fulfill. But it's to take out the other admin sort of things that social workers have to do, filing this, lots of things that so a lot of time is being saved from there. What we are seeing in Staffordshire is, and again, Ofsted confirmed it for us, that we know our children. We absolutely know their journey. We are able to articulate their voice, and that would not happen if we weren't visiting and seeing our children. To be very honest, if we didn't have the staffing issues that we have, our social workers would want to be out there much more than we can than what is permitted with the resource that we have at this point in time. But there's not to say that we can't aspire for the best, and that's what we are trying to do. And that's the restorative approach. The other thing, as Mark alluded, was the district model. So again, in neglect, for anything else when we are working, it's not always the social worker who holds the baton for safeguarding children, it's everybody's business. And this district model brings together the opportunity for a child to be supported in partnership within their area, which is, and we can see that it is starting to work. We have district leads, we have managers, they can build those relationships within their local communities, with schools, with health, with the local police, with the voluntary organizations within their local area. So that is also really helping to get that team around the child. So it is work in progress. We are aspirational. We do want to be out there, because that's what our social workers are saying. They said that to Ofsted as well. You know, we would want to be out there much more, but sometimes because of various pressures, you know, that we are not able to get there always, but we are still doing quite well because we know our children.
Thank you for that. Just a couple of things from me, if I could. I note on the previous set of documents that we had that this item was called low-level neglect. And I know following those tragic events in 2019, one of the themes that ran through that was this theme of low-level neglect. I think it was categorised, as I remember, by a failure to take young people to dental appointments or to the doctors, or missing hospital appointments. And then, because they missed the hospital appointment, they were then taken off the list and no one knew, so they then disappeared back into the ether. Do we think that talking about low-level neglect separate from neglect is the right thing to do? Because it strikes me that if we have these catastrophic or potentially catastrophic outcomes on children's lives from neglect, shouldn't we just talk about it being neglect? Is there a danger of categorising another form, you know, sort of, you know, low-level murder, you know, that sort of business where we don't give it as much serious thought? And actually, I dare say most young people, I don't know, of course, most young people probably start off in low-level neglect environments that gets worse as time goes on. And if we are maintaining that description of low-level neglect, what are we doing to, I know we talked about the district model, but surely it has to be broader than just a district if we're including hospitals that might be in the county somewhere. How is all of that being pulled together if we still have an emphasis around low-level neglect?
That's an interesting point, Chair, and I was thinking about it when I was doing this paper. So low-level neglect, it's I suppose it has got its merits in keeping that terminology, because majority of, you know, young parents, single parents, majority of issues around low-level neglect should be identified and addressed quite early on. It is the help at the earliest opportunity. And that's what we are trying to embed within our Tier 1 and Tier 2 services, because if we address those low-level neglect, likelihood is, and that's what, again, as a district model in this transformation, we are working towards, to reduce the amount of children who need institutional support, who need high-level support. If I had my way, what I wouldn't want is for this to become a machinery in itself, because neglect and low-level neglect, it's a continuum. What we need to understand is we need to identify those early signs of neglect and address them at the earliest opportunity. We need to strengthen our Tier 1 and Tier 2 support in terms of awareness is one thing, because I think many times, and that's what we've been trying to do, it's being clued on that everything counts towards one big thing eventually. So we need to spot those early signs. So I think professionally I would want to keep that terminology, but I wouldn't want to segregate it from the larger neglect, because then there is a danger of we do this for one and that for the other, because it isn't. It's a continuum.
Thank you for that. I think that's really encouraging to hear that. And I think we're all probably on the same page about trying to spot the early signs, and all the evidence would suggest that is the way forward, of course. The report talks a lot about the GCP2 programme. Do you think that that is sensitive enough to pick up signs of early neglect? Or, because didn't we used to call it bad parenting or poor parenting or something? And, how are we making that distinction? Importantly, how are we deciding at such low level when intervention is necessary? I would imagine that most people, including social workers, are probably reluctant to get involved at every example of what used to be called bad parenting. So where's the border, where's the demarcation for us, and is GCP2 sensitive enough to be able to spot that?
So graded care profile is a well-researched and used tool. And what the tool helps to do is to bring together the information, that when you look each incident in isolation, it isn't important enough. It's, you can easily ignore things. Didn't attend school, didn't go to health appointment, all those kind of things. But when you put that information in a tool, it provides you with a scoring mechanism whereby okay, now, so many times this has happened, I need to do something about it. Again, use of tool is good to evidence things. What professionals should always understand is that there is this human, decision making that always works, because sometimes there will be some times where tools may or may not give you, but you've got that gut feeling, and that's what we always talk about. You've got to go with that understanding and your own experience, your own professional curiosity, your own professional experience to make those decisions. What this tool will do and does do is, because when we talk about neglect or low-level neglect, where as soon as a professional terminology comes into being, people will usually think social care. What we want to get is earlier help at earliest opportunity. And this tool is a very simple tool that anyone can do within community. So any school, any police officers, we're trying to work with them. They don't feel they work long enough with a family to get there to do a tool. But that's a different conversation. But, schools, health, that health visitor, that midwife, anyone in the community can use the tool and then probably see, actually, my niggle had an evidence. There is that evidence base on which I can take it forward. What it will also do is if a child, if at an earliest opportunity help is not making that change, at some point the professional has to make a decision, I need to refer it higher up because I can't bring that change for this child. That tool then gives you the evidence base to say, I use this tool, this was my finding, this is what I have done with the family, not changing. It needs something else happening with this family. So it kind of creates that evidence base early on. It helps professionals to gather their views, to form an opinion, and also to share, because it's unfair to be in a family's life without them understanding why you are there in the first place. So it helps to articulate it for the families themselves.
No, that's very encouraging, thank you. Councillor McMahon, I think you wanted another question.
It's a follow-on from your last question, really, and that's the GDP 2 piece. There's no tool that's perfect, and clearly using a tool that many professions that can use is clearly helpful. And you outline it in page 10 of the report in section 5. But when you go through to page 11, you talk about the audit and looking and seeing what we've done. What I don't see is an audit of the tool itself, and what people think about the tool, whether they think it's working. We don't know what we don't know. Do they think there's problems with it? Because one can become so reliant on something like that we could end up missing something, or it could be too bureaucratic for some people. It would just be good to have faith in it, that people have that audit loop so they can feed back about the tool itself. So,
Thank you.
So, as I said earlier, we have delivered the training for this tool. What we realize is people are not using it. So that is why we have set up this steering group, which is being led by my PSW now, and that steering group is going to hold people account. That's where the performance framework will be actually challenged, that, okay, we've got this scorecard, so what? So that question is, we are going to ask that question to ourselves and our partnership. So we've done the training, so what? So you've learned this, so what? We've got the performance scorecard, so what? Because they focus now, and we had an interesting discussion in our safeguarding board that we've done all of this work, but we are not able to articulate how is it making a change to that child's life. So that is why we go to triangulate from other sources of information. That's why we go to audits, the feedbacks, looking at case files, speaking to families, and finding out, is it working? Because we can't stop, the work doesn't stop because a tool is not being used. The work is still happening. The awareness is helping people to articulate their assessments, their plans, and their scope of intervention. So that is definitely helping. We can see that. But how are we articulating our evidence with all that investment that is going in? So that's why the steering group, to actually challenge ourselves and help us get there.
Thank you. Could I just ask as well, following on from those events, we keep going back to them, and it's in the report about 2019. Where, in your opinion, where are we in this process of change at the moment? In as much as the report talks about raising awareness, rolling out this tool. However, one of the things that we wanted to achieve was this professional curiosity, or improving, I think that was it, a phrase of every child matters, I think, wasn't it, of a few years ago. And you yourself talked about skilling professionals and that human approach. And it strikes me that professional curiosity is more to do with almost being a detective, isn't it? Asking those difficult, challenging questions, not relying on a tool. And when I describe it as a tick the box, I don't mean that in a detrimental way, but I presume that the tool looks at various things and then gives you a suggestion. Whereas developing professional curiosity, to me, seems to be a few steps ahead of that. How do we train people to ask the right questions, to be sort of pedantic and challenging, and not taking yes or no for an answer, and moving on? So would I be right in assuming that in this process we're probably still at the awareness raising, or would you say that we have a level of professional curiosity already in the organisation?
So there are two aspects to this. Professional curiosity within children's social care. Of course, we are a huge county, so we need to bring that consistency across. We have new professionals entering the profession of social work, so it takes time, experience, reflection, and we have got those reflective spaces within social care to achieve that. So as an AD, if you ask me the question, am I satisfied with the level of professional curiosity we have in children's social care? Yes, I am, because we are asking the right question. We need to get consistency, and we are creating those opportunities for those discussions, reflection, supervision, so that people are, they have that professional curiosity at every level. As a partnership, which is tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, there is much work to do. But we are moving in the right direction, because that's a huge cohort of professionals coming from, having different priorities, coming from different walks of life and backgrounds, and to bring all of them to one place is an ambitious task. But I think as a partnership, from the time I have been here, we are not afraid, at least at a strategic level, to ask difficult questions, to challenge each other. That's why when I attended the safeguarding board, when we talked about how are we articulating our impact, so we are doing all these lovely things, how are we articulating that impact on the child's life, it was understood that no, we got to get better at that. So we are not afraid to challenge each other. We are working well with each other. There are difficulties, but there will always be, and we are working together to articulate and iron those out. But yes, there's much work to do.
It's very encouraging to hear that bit about professional curiosity, because I think one of the big worries whenever we have serious case reviews, isn't it, that the child went through 20 or 30 professionals of all different descriptions, all of which could have acted or could have asked a question but didn't. And that always seems to be what happens. So very encouraging. Councillor Padesh.
Thank you, Chair. Just two very quick points. Well, once again, the emphasis on various agencies working collaboratively and sharing information is raised again. And as to professional curiosity, it's actually human curiosity we're talking about. What we're talking about is professionals constantly being reminded that as a human being, if you have that gut feeling, there's not something quite right, or you know what, I'm not so sure I'm happy with what she said, I need to double check that with my GP or whatever. So every human being has that curiosity, but it's constantly reminding professionals, bring it to the forefront if in doubt. The second point, Chair, is, and I don't expect you, Nisha, to answer this, is that the importance of early intervention programs is continually emphasised. And we need to think twice when it comes to cutting services, getting rid of these types of programs. All we're doing is building up problems for the future. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Did you want to reply to?
I think a very pertinent point is made. It is because you're right when you say that professional curiosity, that gut feeling is amongst all of us. When I, through my journey in my career, when I've seen that people haven't quite exercised that professional curiosity, I suppose sometimes because of lack of investment in their own professional development, but majority of times it is because you have got conflicting priorities. So even if you have a curiosity, you don't follow your nose because you've got 10 other things to deal with. So cutting down resources is definitely one thing, but we all need to find an efficient way of working and working together, because so that there are safety measures in place as a partnership. That's what we are aiming to.
Thank you for that, Councillor Sutton.
I think just to add a little bit to that, and and as well as yourself, Chairman, having been in that position where you are professionally curious about something, I think a key to that as well is being able to have access to other information about other professionals who might also have been professionally curious, but without that altogether, you perhaps think that doesn't quite reach the threshold. So that partnership work and sort of data sharing, or being able to quickly access other professionals so that you can form a conclusion, I think is really important. And Councillor Pelosi raises an important point about early intervention, and members will see that in the strategic plan there is an emphasis there on early years work as well, which in itself is that early preventative stuff, and the family hubs program that will be coming forward, and there's talk isn't in the Josh Mcallister about not having separating early help, but it's become family help going forward. So all those things are being well considered as we move forward in deciding how family hubs will progress in the future. And part of transformation was about having more of what we used to call early help workers, but now family practitioners, support workers, enhancing that model so there are more people that can help and support the social workers to do that family sort of intervention work, along with having adult specialist workers, because quite a lot of the time, yes, you can work with the children, but it's the adults in that family that you have to do the work with in order to rectify the situation, to make it safe and better for the child going forward.
Yes, thank you for that. I do think you're absolutely right on that essential bit of early intervention, as I think we're all pushing against the same open door there, aren't we? It is obviously the way that we protect young and vulnerable people better. I do think, though, that we should recognise the fact that it has been a difficult journey, not only for Staffordshire, but regionally, nationally, around, as Councillor Sutton pointed out, that use of intelligence that's held by all of those various agencies, and very often we know what the problem is, or an agency knows what the problem is, but doesn't necessarily share it or share it in the right way. Everything I see at the moment tends to suggest to me that we've recognised that and we are moving in the right direction to try to put that right. And I think that the hubs is a good example of that. Actually, I think we can't just keep doing what we've done previously. We do have to work in a different way. And everything I see around the transformation programme suggests to me that it's the right way forward, and we are engaging with those other agencies. Councillor Eaglin.
Thank you. First and foremost, thank you for the report. I'd like to, and I'm very pleased to hear that you've got an adequate force of health visitors, people. It's been a long-term problem for trying to recruit people of health visitors or help of any kind for our children. But I'd like to ask you a question. When my involvement as an elected member of the County Council, I am involved with a family involvement bureau. They locally, I'm that representative in my local district, and on that at that board and partnerships, they see children, they see people from pregnancy right the way through their children's lives. So they get involved at the very early stage of children. Some of these people have got other children as well. So I wondered if you included these people, these trained people, health people that deal with these young people on the family involvement bureaus. I wondered, in your training programme, do you actually invite these people? Because they are the groundwork. They see the people that from pregnancy right the way through the children's lives. Are they being included on your training scheme?
Councillor, can I just double check? Did you mean health visitors?
Health visitors, but they're, nationally, historically, Staffordshire County Council have always had a problem trying to get people to join us here. And then when we have trained them, they go off to other places and other councils. And I was very pleased to hear you say today you've got a full complement.
I wouldn't know about health visitors, although we do have because I am children's social care, so I do know about social workers.
Okay.
So, but we have...
you don't work with the health visitors, with the social workers, because they all come in to know each other, don't they, locally?
Yes, so health visitors, we do work with them, and that's why when I say we work in partnership, so our safeguarding board has got 3 statutory partners, which is social care, health and police. So health includes the health visitors, midwifery support and all that, and they are included in the training. So yes.
Thank you.
The safeguarding partnership, if I just may explain, includes education, social care, health, police, and also voluntary services. It also includes youth offending, which is criminal justice system. So we try and bring all professionals who would be around a child and trying to work together with everyone.
Is this virtual that you meet or face-to-face with this training?
During COVID, that is why there was a slight delay, because it is a face-to-face training, but then it had to be repurposed to be held virtually, because that's why you see such low number of champions, because a champion training is almost like a trainer in itself. So you got to do that face-to-face, and in COVID, we couldn't do that. So that is why our plans were not, we couldn't meet the targets that we wanted to, but we are now moving ahead with it. So it is a mix now, virtual and face-to-face, because it helps more people to come along.
Okay. Well, they're all really interested in keeping the public healthy, whatever early age they are, and what their involvement is with the families. But thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Sutton.
Yeah, if I may, Chairman, just a way of just to clarify the situation a little bit around health visitors. So health visitor contract is what we refer to as our 0 to 19 contract, because it includes health visitors and children's and school nurses. Currently, the contract is held by MPFT Midlands Foundation Trust, but is commissioned by the County Council under the public health. But the health visitors themselves work for MPFT.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Bennett.
I'd like to ask, how closely do we work with schools? Because there's some schools who are very good at picking up low-level neglect, and they've got a lot of children on their books and they work really well with them. But then there's other schools where they're claiming funding for a child who's got extra needs and that, and then not using them in an appropriate way. How can we tighten up on that? I mean, I know of a particular case that I'm speaking about, and it's not a Staffordshire school. They've moved from an East Cheshire school into Staffordshire now, because the school where they were in East Cheshire were claiming money for extra tuition and all sorts of things, and the child wasn't getting the help, and it was an adopted child as well. So how can we ensure that all schools are giving the service that they're supposed to be giving, and that they are getting the training and spotting this low-level neglect and flagging it up, please?
So in terms of the training, awareness generation, all that resource, schools are a part of that. So that is one angle from which we are trying to reach out to all the schools. We do realize schools play a very important part in our Tier 1 support, that is earliest opportunity. So again, there are quite a few different things. So we had our social worker in school program, which was last year. And by means of, through this program, what we did was double districts, so 1 social worker in schools, and they covered 2 districts to support the schools around that. Now we've recently heard that government funding is being extended for this financial year as well. So thankfully that program is going to continue from September onwards. So that is one where there are social workers on ground to support and advise school head teachers, anyone, if there are issues that they might have concerns about how to deal with those things. Then we have our front door, where we have qualified, experienced professionals. That was again a part of transformation decision. We decided to put qualified social workers in the front door so that when any school or any other partner agency calls us, we function in a very restorative manner. So we rather than expecting, like many other local authorities do, expect a paper referral and somebody at the other end of the computer is typing some notes and making a decision, we actually pick up the phone and give the call to the referrer, discuss what they are trying to say, trying to pull out the issues that they're trying to raise, and then advise and support them. Surely, if there is something that needs social care tier 3, tier 4 intervention, we will take that referral in. But there are majority of times that it's an advice, support, and signposting to the right support within community. So that is taking place. In addition to that, we know around children with more complex needs that schools sometimes struggle to offer that support. And what we have done was a very successful project, and very recently again we have agreed to fund that for the next financial year through our BRFC funding, is our Saplings project, where children with additional needs or complex needs at risk of exclusion in primary. So those are the families who then struggle and suffer down the line. So it is again putting qualified, experienced staff working with schools, working with support services within local authority to support schools to develop those capabilities and abilities around that child and for other children. How do we manage those things? Because exclusion doesn't help that child, certainly doesn't help the child, doesn't help anyone in that process. We are again looking to fund a similar program for secondary schools. This program, we are still in early stages of getting the ideas clearer, because Saplings worked really well in primary level. So we want to replicate something similar for exclusions in secondary school, because that's when we start seeing those children enter into high-end, children in care, youth offending service, and all that. So although I know the name for that project, I'm not going to quite put it out today, but it is coming. And that is how we will be able to support our secondary schools and children in those establishments. And last but not the least, I would say, is our district model again. That relationship from social care and schools, it opens up the gates for those discussions. So those are regular meetings when we are meeting with schools, where they can share any issues, any concerns that they might have. And there is a lot of work that is happening in Tier 2, because my colleague Natasha Moody, who looks after the partnerships and early help at Tier 2 level, a lot of work is happening around that for getting children school ready. And that piece of work, I believe, is happening quite well in Staffordshire. So I share your concerns. I understand where you're coming from, but there is a lot of things we are trying to work. It will take some time. Of course, Staffordshire is huge. To get consistency is the big challenge for us, isn't it? To get that consistency, but we absolutely recognize the issue, and we are putting things in place to support professionals to make those decisions, to support children and families at the earliest opportunity.
Did you want to follow on? No, thank you for that. I think that's hugely encouraging as well to see that, or to hear that we are thinking, we've recognised those issues. And when I use the word plan, whatever we have by way of a plan, I think is very encouraging. Councillor Perry, I think you wanted a question.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a little follow-up on that. That's all schools, because a lot of our schools now are academies, but it includes all of the schools. I'm taking it, that you're working to. Yes? Yeah.
So if you want the details, I will go and find out which schools, because I do know we have a lot of academies, but we do work very closely with all those academies. And my colleague, who is AD for education, we keep in regular touch as to how we are, because many times when there are issues that arise from schools, it comes to county DMG or local DMG, then we are discussing those issues and we are trying to support those establishments within communities. Yes. But the access to our early help, to our front door, it's open to everybody, not just our schools, but yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Last question from me, if I could. I know that we, as an organisation and as individuals, of course, were shocked at the events of 2019 and as a committee are charged with making sure that we're making sufficient progress. I know you can never discount that these things will ever happen again, but we do want to make sure that the organisation is in perhaps in a better place. Just on paragraph 13, just some clarification if I could. It talks about the orders highlighting practical support from a range of appropriate services, remains consistent with the findings of the report in 2020, which would only have been 12 months after the events of the fire. Does that mean, and I'm just asking the question about the interpretation, that it's consistent that we're doing the right thing, or is it consistent with what happened in 2020, therefore we haven't made any progress? Does that make sense? I just wondered what that means, if I could just have some clarification around that.
I can find further clarification if you need, but my understanding is that plans are in place and things are moving in the right direction, and the support that we plan to put in place is starting to work.
Councillor Sutton.
Not specifically on that point, Mr. Chairman, but if we were coming to sort of the end of questions, I did make a few notes following the question that Councillor McMahon asked to start with around the amount of time that social workers spend doing reports as opposed to working with families. And one of the aims from transformation was to change that. Previously, social workers were reporting, we were asked that they were spending about 60% of the time doing reports and stuff. So one of the aims of transformation, and I don't know how that's going specifically on that point, is to move that so that they are spending the opposite way around, 60% of the time being able to work with families and only 40% doing paperwork. I think we have to be aware, don't we? And there's been a number of white papers, reviews and things recently. There's obviously the Josh Mcallister review of children's social care, and more or less at the same time was the reviews that were ordered into the deaths of Arthur and Star, which we will have all seen in the national paper. You know, and there are some contradictions in those reports. I think we have to be careful, don't we? And historically, whenever there's been a serious case review, it's tended to come up with lots of suggestions that people might do, but move us more towards that bureaucratic ticky box, make sure this is done and that's be done. And what we have to be is really careful to have the right balance. Clearly, there has to be an amount of bureaucracy because social workers move on, things get handed over to somebody else, or quite legitimately, a child is no longer under child protection, but then in the future they may come back to it, and we need to make sure records and things are properly kept. But there is an absolute balance, isn't there? And I note that in the future you've on your future agendas you're looking towards having an update about the Josh Mcallister review in September, and maybe that's the type of thing that we could perhaps, you know, if that's what the committee want, talk about that sort of balance, which I think is really, really important going forward.
Absolutely, and hence why we asked for a report on the Mcallister report. Disappointingly, I think it's been a bit slow coming, but that isn't a fault of ours. I understand it's a national issue, and I completely understand the point you make and agree that whenever we have serious case reviews and those things that hit the headlines nationally, we are then bombarded with yet another list of things to do. I do think, though, that the responsibility that we have as a committee here in Staffordshire is clearly to make sure that we're protecting young people here in Staffordshire. And Staffordshire will be suffering from all of the issues that are present nationally. And having said that, I think, and thank you for Nisha for coming this morning and answering all those questions and preparing the report. It was really helpful. But, you know, I still remain almost selfishly tied to the fact that we are here to make sure that young people, vulnerable people, are protected here in Staffordshire. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say actually I've been really encouraged from what I've heard today. It does sound like we are on that journey. It is about raising that awareness. It is about doing things differently. It does sound like that we're thinking about the right things. You were talking earlier about more involvement with schools. So again, I do think it is a reassuring message for us all to take as we move forward. Councillor McMahon, I think you wanted to make a point.
I too am quite assured, and I do think that we are going in the right direction, and I'm grateful for what you've had to say. This is something that is close to my heart, but I think is very relevant. And it's a risk to children that's really only become apparent in the last 10 years. And that's the whole business of, where is it? These. And accessing the internet and social media and all that sort of stuff. And does this tool, this GCP2, reference use of these in terms of time and in terms of the degree of access? And if not, where does that sit in terms of in terms of professionals assessing children's risk? Because it strikes me that these could amplify the risk of low-level abuse quite considerably if parents don't take due care and attention as to how their children use them. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
So the tool doesn't look at the use of a device, but it does look at how parents are organizing their routines. It looks at how much time parents are spending with children, whether they're taking children to regular appointments in timely way or not, because all of that is the side effect of using a device. Just on a side, because this is not related to neglect, but use of devices is increasing the level of criminal exploitation. There is a huge risk around criminal and sexual exploitation. And whilst we are seeing a rise in criminal exploitation in Staffordshire, particularly in the north of the county, what I want to offer is a reassurance that we have got a very robust team, a very robust service, very informed professionals who are working relentlessly to support children, young people in the best possible manner. We probably have one of the best offers of support around exploitation, but it is a territory which is ever evolving, and we are working very closely with police, and we are constantly having to find ways how we can address issues earlier and support families move on or come out from it. So that is a huge risk, yes.
And that's really encouraging. But in terms of the low-level neglect which we're discussing here, inappropriate access and use for a child's age prior to being contacted by those who would wish them harm is in itself low-level abuse. I mean, these things are addictive. I'm sure the business model is very similar to Philip Morris when you look at Facebook and the like. So I would ask you to consider that, because I do think it's quite important.
Thank you for that. I don't think any other points. The recommendation on this particular report was that we scrutinise the work that's been undertaken so far. I think we've done that this morning. Again, Nisha, if I could just say a huge thank you for coming here this morning, answering all those questions and providing that reassurance. I do think that we're moving in the right direction, and please give our thanks to all of those people who are working hard to keep people safe here in Staffordshire. So thank you. Moving on then to item 5, community safety, the outcome of the Fishmongers Hall inquiry. I think members will recall we asked for this report about 12 months ago. It came out with the earlier set of papers. For those who aren't aware of, I'm sure most people are aware what happened at Fishmongers Hall. 2 young people from Cambridge University who were delivering an offender rehabilitation course were tragically stabbed to death by an individual who had extremist views and unfortunately was in the care and support of Staffordshire at the time he committed the offences. The subsequent inquest raised some real concerns about how some of the agencies dealt with him. Not least of all the fact that his prison psychiatric report suggested that he would offend again and he should be banned from public transport and entering large cities. And unfortunately somebody decided to buy him a railway ticket to travel on his own to London. So there was some mistakes made. To be clear, Staffordshire County Council was not criticised in that report. The criticism was mainly around policing, the prison service, Cambridge University, of course, around their risk assessments in all of these things. But clearly we work as a partnership with those other agencies, and there is undoubtedly going to be potentially like-minded individuals who are being cared for, supported, managed here in Staffordshire. And I thought it was important that we reassure ourselves that these agencies are doing everything that they can to keep us all safe. And when we have to manage a dangerous individual, we are doing it. We're doing it properly. The report did come out. It was due to come here. Obviously, it's on the agenda. I had a telephone call and an email from the Commissioner himself to say that he wanted to pull together all of those agencies at a seminar and a meeting, whereby, and following that meeting, then there would be a report about how things have changed. It's fair to say there's been substantial, significant change in a lot of the organisations that were criticised already. The difficulty I have with the process is the sort of clandestine, secret nature that has to be there. I understand that. It was the world that I worked in before I retired from the police. However, the difficulty is that when you have things, secret things being managed by other groups separately, then where is that feedback to local authorities, to local communities, to reassure them that they are being kept safe? The Commissioner wants to pull all those agencies together, as I said, and that meeting is on the 28th of this month. I've had an invite to go along to that meeting, which I will do. And what I then propose to do is, not unless people want to discuss this report, it's not in the papers. If people want to add something or ask me to raise something, I'm more than happy to do that. But then I was going to bring this report back to probably the September meeting, is it, or October? And also then by that time we'll have had this meeting and I can then update the committee better rather than trying to guess at what is happening. I just think it makes more sense to do it in that order. Right, Councillor Eaglin.
Thank you very much for that statement. This isn't the first time that we've had somebody being looked after by the people in Staffordshire have had something like this happen. We had it not so long, a few years ago, we had somebody, a stabbing happening in Staffordshire, in Stafford, rather. And this person that did the stabbing was obviously had mental problems, but obviously the authorities knew about it. So when I heard about this one, the Fishmongers Hall, and I heard about Staffordshire being the overall minder of this man, my memory went back to this other occasion, and I'm very grateful that this has been taken up by the Commissioner, and I look forward to hearing that report from you, just to feel assured so that when we go out and we tell our parishes, because it does come up, when we go to a parish council meeting, they ask, you know, it's the natural thing that people will ask what in questions when you're asked. They want assurance that this is going to be taken care of, and we're going to learn by this lesson. And so, yeah, I'll be looking forward to hearing that report from you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Far too often prisons are a place we hear where people are radicalised or further radicalised, when actually there should be an opportunity in order to address this. And rather than come out more of a risk to society, they ought to be coming out less of a risk to society. And I wonder if that's something you might wish to assure yourself on the 28th that something is happening in that regard, and if it's not mentioned, raise it.
Yes, I certainly will. I think that one of the main criticisms was around the prison service and around a programme called Prevent, which is precisely that, is about how do you de-radicalise individuals. I mean, there is a lot of debate about whether that can actually be achieved or not. However, as Cambridge University would argue that, you know, there is some evidence that it can be done, and hence they were trying to do that on the day. But I'll certainly take that up. I'll wait. But I'm told that the changes that have swept through the prison service have been quite significant following this. Any other issues? No. I'll thank you for that, and I'll certainly be bringing back that report in the very, very near future. Item 6 then, on to the work programme. Helen, if you could help us with that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So members will remember that we had a very useful informal work programme planning session on the 23rd of May, which was just after the annual council meeting. And at that meeting there, members put forward a number of items and also a number of queries that we wanted to look at further. So if I can just update you really on the work that I've been doing since then. So we've just heard about the Fishmonger Hall report. We have got scheduled at the moment for the September meeting a further work. Really, it was going to be further work on leading on from the Fishmongers Hall if we consider it today. But I still think it's useful if we're putting that feedback on Fishmongers Hall on the September meeting. We've got penciled in for them, looking at the local authorities' role in the Prevent Partnership. So that will look at your role as the Crime and Disorder Panel and Staffordshire's role more broadly within that. And so if we have that feedback from the 28th of June and the report that we were going to come today, that works quite nicely together, doesn't it, those two, if everybody's happy with that. We've also been asked to look at whole life disability strategy, which looks at adults in relation to learning disabilities, physical disabilities and also autism, primarily for those 18 plus, but also looking at preparation for adulthood from 14 plus. Preparation for adulthood was something that we were, or the committee was considering having a working group on pre-COVID, and then clearly everything changed, and we haven't reinstated that as a working group, but it's something members may like to look at. This is one of those things that is a crossover between, does it go to health or does it come here? So there's been a discussion at the Chair's Forum, and the Chair of Health has suggested it comes here. So it's penciled in at the moment for January because it's a piece of pre-decision scrutiny, and that fits with the roll into Cabinet, if everybody's happy with that. The Children's Transformation Service at the moment we've got penciled in for September, and if you remember in May we discussed inviting Prosperous. I need to get back to colleagues from Prosperous yesterday. I haven't managed to speak to Jonathan yet, but there was some discussion from them as to whether it was a representative who came or the whole committee. We'd intended to invite the whole committee. So I'll clarify that. Clearly, if we're doing that, we were going to book the council chamber. If they're just sending a representative, we'll stay in here. But I'll clarify that with them. We're still waiting the executive response from the Spotlight review into sexual harassment. I have chased that and I'll chase it again and hopefully get that. It would be nice to be able to bring that in July, but certainly in September. The Send Green paper has been something that's sat on the work programme. It actually went to Prosperous yesterday. So again, I was going to suggest that I send the paper, email the paper or the link to their papers to you, but I would like to wait until I've got the extract from the minutes, if that's okay, and then you can have a look at what they've seen and what the conclusions they've come to, because again, it's one of those things that could come here, could go there, clearly did, and we had a joint working party looking at those issues previously as well, but rather than duplicate, if I circulate that, then you'll be able to come to a decision as to whether you want it to remain on your work programme. The young carer visits, you will all have received details of, I hope. So we discussed this again in May. We had a slight change of direction with those because on reflection, the officer in charge of organising the respite was concerned that because we'd filled all the dates she'd given us, essentially, she was concerned that if members were going on consecutive monthly respite events, then the children effectively weren't necessarily getting that much respite because there was a distraction in there, you know, on consecutive months, which is absolutely fine. So what I did was I've went back to you all and thank you so much for your patience. And we've managed to rejig things so that most people can get to one. Mr. Wilcox, unfortunately, isn't able to make the date in July, but I'm hoping to sort a visit out for him in September. She has also suggested, and I know the members I spoke to were quite keen to participate in, some sort of a Teams meeting, which we will probably do in September because they will sort of finish at the end of July. The respite finishes once school term stops. So it would make sense to do it in September when there's a little bit more scope in everybody's calendars. And she will pick 2 or 3 carers young carers that she feels will be comfortable discussing in that sort of forum. So I will come back to you with dates on that as soon as I've heard from her. Mrs. Eagland, I'm happy to go with you on the 11th, so we'll go together to your visit. I forwarded to her the 4 questions that I sent to you all. If anyone has any more, do let me know. This isn't these are the only questions we're going to ask. She just said, could you give me an idea of what members may be asking? So it will depend on the young carers, won't it, as to how comfortable she feels they're going to be with members' attendance. So that's a work in progress. And then once members have been to the visits, we'll feed back at an appropriate meeting, whether you want that in, because some will have done a visit by the July meeting, some by the September, or whether you want to leave that so that we all feed back together. That's a judgment for yourselves. Okay. As requested, I've put in another informal work programme planning meeting. That's at the conclusion of the 24th of November, because in May you said it would be useful to just have another informal session to reflect on where we were. So that's penciled in. The Mcallister Report, as we've seen, is in September. The Triangulation Meeting, which is the meeting members may know that the Chairman and Vice Chairman have with the Directors and Cabinet members, we have a slight problem. It's supposed to be next week, but I've noticed that they've organised a Cabinet and SLT away day on that day, so I don't think we're going to get any Cabinet members coming to the Triangulation. So I'll look to reorganise that, and I'm wondering whether we can do it in the afternoon of the 1st of September. We have our meeting then, but there seemed to be a gap in everybody's calendar for that, but I'll come back to you on that. I think that is more or less an update from where we were before, unless members have got any further queries. I've updated the work programme from the discussions that we had in May, and that's the one that's in your papers. Obviously, there's a slight rejig to do from today, but it's a dynamic document, as everybody knows, so any time that members want to include further items or items need to be moved, that can happen at any point.
Thank you for that. I just a thought as you were going through those things there with the visits to the young carers. I don't want to spoil the plans that have already been made, but if there is a view that they might become overwhelmed with this wave of counsellors all in one go, would it be preferable to maybe do one every 3 months over a period of time, and then we just get, they're not being overwhelmed and everyone has an opportunity to go at some stage?
Having spoken to my colleague, because we're going around the county, there are, what we'd originally had was she'd given me 2 or 3 dates per setting, and there are different children at each setting. So the setting in Hensford will have children local to there. And what we'd done is we'd filled each, because we wanted to have fewer numbers so that the children weren't overwhelmed by the numbers. But on reflection, she said, rather than having, 2 or 3 consecutive meetings where they've got people that they don't know attending, it will be better to have it done in one go, which is, so that's the balance we've struck at the moment. Okay.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on the work programme? Councillor Padesh.
Just very quickly, Chair, at the end of our last scrutiny meeting committee, we dealt with one issue very quickly. Helen raised 2 reports that she was aware of, one on hate crimes against people of colour and one on hate crimes on members of our LGBT community. And with the utmost respect to you, Chair, I felt that you were quite dismissive of those reports. You made a comment along the lines of, well, these aren't concerns that anybody has raised with me. Maybe, dare I say, Chair, that's because most of the people that you associate with are white and straight. But my point is that when that situation arises again, I think we should be at least given the opportunity to choose whether we'd like to take a look at those reports. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, and I consider myself chastised. I do take exception to the fact that you seem to know the people that I mix with. Clearly you don't, because I won't go into it. However, I wasn't aware I was being dismissive. If these reports need to come to this committee, then we can do that. If I made a comment where I sounded like I was dismissing them, then I apologise for that. But I do take exception to you seem to be indicating that you know my family makeup and you know the sort of company and friends that I keep. I think you'd be very surprised. But certainly I'll have a look at both of those reports and if necessary I will bring them back to this committee. Any other comments? No. Moving on then. Well, item 7, I don't think there is anything we're going to exclude the public 4 if there were anyone here. So that's the end of the meeting. Thank you very much again for coming, and we've got dates for the next pre-meet. And in the meantime, I think I will try to contact some of the members who haven't been here for a while to see if I can encourage them to turn up. Thank you again.